Part 1: The silence we fear, the freedom we avoid. There is a particular silence most people never meet. A silence that arrives when the noise fades, when the phone is face down, when there is no one to text, no one to impress, no one to distract you from yourself. Most people do everything they can to avoid that silence. They call it loneliness, but the Stoics had another name for it: the meeting with the self. The meeting is uncomfortable not because it is empty, but because it is full. Full of the truths we avoid, the desires we delay, the wounds we have not yet healed. So we seek distractions, relationships being the most convenient of them. We convince ourselves we are searching for love, but often we are only searching for noise, something to drown out the internal voice that asks, "Who am I when no one is watching?" This is where the video begins, with the suggestion that many relationships are founded not on strength, but on escape. The fear of solitude masquerading as love. Stoicism has been warning us about this for over 2,000 years. The chains we choose. The ancient Stoics believed that the most dangerous prisons are the ones we willingly walk into. These prisons don't look like cages or cells. They look like comfort. They look like romance. They look like companionship. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not external things that chain us, but our dependence on them." This is the heart of the issue. Most people do not enter relationships because they are whole. They enter because they are fractured, hoping another person will mend the cracks. But no relationship can fix what a person refuses to face in themselves. When love is born from fear, it becomes attachment. When love is born from fullness, it becomes freedom. The video succeeds because it invites the listener to see solitude not as lack, but as opportunity, not a void, but a workshop of the soul. The first transformation, the shield of singleness. The first major insight the video delivers is this: being single protects you from the wrong attachments. Most of the emotional suffering people endure in relationships does not come from bad people, but from misaligned ones. People who do not share your values, your rhythm, or your direction, but who fit conveniently into your loneliness. When you fear being alone, you cannot choose wisely. You choose quickly. You choose desperately, and desperation blinds you. The Stoics would say, "A choice made out of need is not a choice, it is surrender." Remaining single teaches patience. It trains your perception. It sharpens your intuition about people. When you do not need anyone, you can see everyone more clearly. You start to recognize a who drains you versus who nourishes you, a who respects your boundaries versus who tests them, a who seeks connection versus who seeks control. This clarity alone can save a person years of misdirection and emotional decay. Being single is not the absence of love, it is the defense of your future love. The second transformation, the ownership of time. Time is the most valuable resource a human being possesses. Not money, not status, not even talent. Time is the currency of life itself. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And one of the easiest ways to waste life is to anchor yourself to someone who pulls you away from who you could become. The wrong relationship does not simply consume your time, it redirects your trajectory. Dreams get postponed. Routines get diluted. Ambitions are softened to keep the peace. But a person who is single has an advantage most people overlook. Their time is entirely their own. They can rise early without explanation. They can pursue a craft without guilt. They can fail without someone questioning their identity. They can start over without mourning permission. To someone on the outside, singleness may look empty. To someone who understands its power, it looks unlimited. Your time returns to you. Your focus returns to you. Your energy returns to you. From that soil, greatness grows. The third transformation, the making of the self. The most important Stoic principle repeated across centuries can be summarized simply: before you aim to lead others, you must learn to lead yourself. But self-leadership requires solitude. Not just being physically alone, but being mentally undistracted. Free from emotional chaos, free from constant negotiation, free from managing another's internal storms. Solitude allows for discipline, reflection, identity formation, Emotional clarity. This is not coldness. It is cultivation. A person who cannot be alone cannot truly know themselves. And a person who does not know themselves cannot truly love. Not others and certainly not themselves. When you stay single intentionally, something shifts. Your habits sharpen. Your mind clears. Your sense of self solidifies. Self-mastery is the real prize of solitude, not loneliness. This is where the story truly begins. We have now laid the philosophical and psychological foundation. A romantic dependency is often fear in disguise. Solitude is a necessary environment for self-growth. Being single is protection, not deficiency. Emotional autonomy is the core of inner freedom. From this point forward, the deeper journey begins. How does one learn to sit with themselves? How does solitude become strength? How does a person become whole before loving another? Part 2. The art of being alone without feeling lonely. There is a difference, a profound one, between being alone and being lonely. Loneliness is the absence of connection. Being alone is the presence of yourself. Most people never learn this difference because they never spend enough time with themselves to see it. They spend their lives escaping into others, into noise, into distractions, into relationships that feel easier than silence. But the silence is where the transformation happens. Stoicism teaches that a person is only free when their sense of inner stability is not dependent on external conditions. Not on comfort, not on approval, not on validation, not on company. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." But most people never get close to that retreat because their soul is cluttered. Cluttered with insecurities. Cluttered with unresolved emotions. Cluttered with unexamined desires. Cluttered with voices that are not their own. They become crowded within themselves, and then they look outward, hoping someone else will relieve the pressure inside them. But love built on avoidance is not love, it is dependency. And dependency is not devotion, it is captivity. Solitude is where you detox the soul. The heart becomes heavy when it carries too many silent attachments. The mind becomes restless when it carries too many unprocessed memories. The spirit becomes tired when it carries too many unspoken disappointments. Solitude is the environment in which the soul is allowed to breathe. When you are alone, you are not performing. You are not negotiating. You are not shrinking or expanding to fit someone else's shape. You are simply being. And it is only in this state of being that a true sense of identity begins to surface. Most people never meet their real selves because their entire lives are spent in reaction to others. Reaction to expectations. Reaction to attention. Reaction to fear. Reaction to rejection. Reaction to judgment. But in solitude, reaction stops and reflection begins. Reflection is the birthplace of wisdom. The first quiet shift. You begin to observe yourself. When you have no one to impress, no one to please, and no one to hide from, the truth finally appears. You begin to notice how your mind works, what you crave and why, what wounds you still carry, what habits are shaping your future, what stories you tell yourself without realizing it. This is not always comfortable. In fact, solitude is often painful in the beginning, not because it is empty, but because it is honest. People do not fear being alone. They fear meeting themselves without distraction. But the Stoics remind us, the beginning of wisdom is seeing yourself clearly. You cannot grow from a false image. You cannot heal what you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot build a powerful life on top of unresolved foundations. Solitude reveals the foundation. And if the foundation is weak, solitude allows you to rebuild it. The second quiet shift. You stop seeking validation. When you spend enough time alone, something remarkable happens. The need for approval softens. The craving for external validation weakens. The urgency to be seen, recognized, and affirmed begins to dissolve. You begin to realize, most attention is shallow. Most opinions are temporary. Most praise is transactional. And most judgment has nothing to do with you. The world stops being a mirror and becomes simply a world. You no longer ask, do they like me? Instead, you ask, Do I respect myself in this moment? Self-respect replaces validation. Inner stability replaces emotional volatility. Groundedness replaces anxiety. This is freedom. The third quiet shift. You learn to enjoy your own company. The moment solitude stops being a burden and becomes a refuge, your life changes. You start to experience peace in your own presence, calm in your own mind, a joy in your own small rituals, satisfaction without an audience. You begin to realize something that most people never understand. Your life does not need to be witnessed to be meaningful. The cup of your life begins to fill from within, not from others. This is the beginning of emotional independence. Not the cold refusal to care. Not emotional withdrawal. Not detachment out of numbness. But fullness. Fullness that comes from purpose, mastery, self-awareness, inner alignment. When you have fullness, you connect to others not to take, but to share. And that is where love becomes real. The fourth quiet shift. You become more discerning about relationships. When you are no longer afraid of being alone, you stop tolerating what is beneath you. You no longer fall for potential instead of reality, attention instead of respect, familiarity instead of compatibility, passion instead of partnership, possession instead of love. You no longer keep people who drain your spirit, blur your clarity, or dim your internal fire. Your standards rise naturally, not because you become demanding, but because you become aware of your value. And value is not loud. Value does not chase. Value does not beg. Value does not cling. Value waits, because value knows right people recognize it. Wrong people are repelled by it. This is why solitude is powerful. It makes you magnetic, not because you try, but because you are aligned. The paradox. When you need no one, you attract the right ones. This is the elegant irony the video points toward. The person who fears being alone clings and pushes love away. But the person who stands whole in themselves is free and becomes deeply attractive. Because wholeness is rare. Stability is rare. Authenticity is rare. Peace is rare. And we are naturally drawn to what is rare. Being single is not an in-between state. Being single is training, refinement, spiritual conditioning, the cultivation of inner strength. You are not waiting. You are building. You are preparing to love in a way most people never do, without dependency, without fear, without possession, without losing yourself. Love becomes not escape but expression. And now the story deepens further. We have established solitude is not loneliness. Solitude is the environment for self-growth. A solitude teaches self-awareness, self-respect, and self-fulfillment. From this inner fullness, real love becomes possible. Now we move into the next transformation, how solitude shapes identity, purpose, discipline, confidence, and the ability to choose love, not out of fear, but out of sovereignty. Part 3: Identity, Purpose, and the Strong Inner Center. Most people enter relationships without ever truly knowing who they are. They know their habits, their preferences, their insecurities, their comforts, but they do not know their identity. Identity is not what you like, what you own, or what others think of you, or who you are with. Identity is what you stand for, or what you value, or what you refuse to compromise. The direction your life is moving. Without this foundation, relationships become dangerous, not because they cause harm, but because they shape you in ways you do not notice. Person without identity bends. Person without identity absorbs. A person without identity becomes whatever keeps the peace. And the tragedy is not that they lose someone. The tragedy is they lose themselves. Solitude is where the self becomes defined. The self before the world shaped you. When you are alone, truly alone, the world stops pulling on you. The expectations quiet down. The pressure to impress disappears. The instinct to compare fades. And slowly, like a photograph emerging in water, your real self begins to appear. Not the version shaped by family pressure, romantic validation, social approval, cultural expectations, but the core of who you are. The Stoics believed that the soul has a natural shape, a direction it longs to move toward. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When you are constantly surrounded by others, you are dyed in their colors. When you are alone, you rediscover your own color. This rediscovery is not loud. It is subtle, quiet, almost private. You start to feel a pull toward certain pursuits, certain values, certain behaviors. That pull is your inner center returning. Purpose emerges in silence. Your purpose does not shout. It whispers, and whispering can only be heard in stillness. This is why many people never find their calling. They never stop long enough to listen. They rush. They distract. They numb. They drown the whisper in noise. But solitude slows the rhythm of life to a pace where the whisper becomes audible. You begin to notice what excites you without external reward, what you return to again and again, what feels meaningful even when no one sees it, what brings you peace instead of stimulation. Purpose is not discovered, it is remembered. It was always there. The noise was just louder. Discipline, the quiet engine of the self. When you are single, your time is yours, but without discipline, time slips through your fingers. This is where the journey deepens. True strength is not just emotional independence, it is self-governance. Self-governance is the ability to command your habits, direct your focus, master your impulses, choose your response instead of reacting. Epictetus taught, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Being single gives you the training ground for this mastery. You learn to awake yourself, motivate yourself, hold yourself accountable, calm yourself, encourage yourself, correct yourself. At first, this is difficult because most people have always relied on others to regulate them. Partners, friends, family. But when you learn to regulate yourself, something powerful happens. You become emotionally unshakable. Your peace is no longer negotiable. Your focus is no longer fragile. Your confidence no longer depends on circumstance. This is the type of person others admire, even if they cannot explain why. Confidence, the natural result of self-harmony. Confidence is not loudness, glamour, performance, posture. Confidence is self-respect in motion. When your actions match your values, you trust yourself. When your behavior aligns with your standards, you respect yourself. And when you respect yourself, you no longer chase respect from others. This is the moment where everything changes. You move differently. You speak with simplicity, not force. You listen more, react less. Your presence deepens. People feel it, though they may not understand it. Because confidence is not something you do. Confidence is something you are when your internal world is in order. And solitude is where that order is built. Love looks different after you know who you are. When your identity is strong, you no longer seek someone to complete you, only someone to walk beside you. When your purpose is clear, you choose someone who aligns with your direction, not someone who distracts you from it. When your discipline is formed, you no longer collapse into emotional chaos, you bring stability into connection. When your confidence is real, you no longer fear loss, you understand that losing yourself is far more costly than losing someone else. At this stage, love is no longer a craving. Love is an offering. You bring your fullness to another. You do not demand they fill what you lack. This is mature love. This is powerful love. This is unconditional love. And only someone who has met themselves in solitude can love like this. Now we move to the turning point. The next part will explore how healthy love is chosen, how to recognize emotional alignment, how to avoid repeating past pain, how to build love without losing individuality. Part 4: Choosing love from strength, not fear. When you have built yourself in solitude, when you have discovered your identity, direction, discipline, and confidence, something fundamental changes in the way you love. You no longer enter relationships to feel less alone. You enter them because your life is already full, and you want to share that fullness. This is the difference between attachment and love. Attachment says, "I need you to feel whole." Love says, "I am whole, and I choose you." Attachment is hunger. Love is presence. Attachment grasps. Love holds lightly. Attachment fears loss. Love respects freedom. This is the emotional maturity that solitude makes possible. The old way of loving, fear-based attachment. Before self-awareness, love often comes from emptiness. You search for security, distraction, a validation, emotional relief. You choose people not because they align with your values, but because they soothe your wounds. And this is why so many relationships become cycles of clinging, controlling, pleasing, self-abandonment, resentment. When fear chooses, love weakens. Even if passion is strong, even if chemistry is intense, even if the connection feels fateful. Intensity does not equal compatibility. Closeness does not equal harmony. Attention does not equal love. Most people never learn this, they only learn the consequences. The new way of loving, strength-based connection. When you have learned to stand alone, love no longer feels like survival. You no longer need someone to fill your silence, someone to prove your worth, someone to make you feel seen, someone to soothe your emotions, because you have learned to give those things to yourself. So now love becomes a choice, not a dependency, a partnership, not an escape, or a shared journey, not an emotional shelter. This is love with clarity. Clarity is powerful, not because it is cold, but because it is stable. You know, what you value, what you will accept, what you will not tolerate, where your life is headed. So you no longer get pulled into relationships that have intensity but no direction. You no longer confuse desire with destiny. The 4 signs of love chosen from strength. When love comes from a grounded place, it has 4 unmistakable qualities. 1. Respect. Not just affection, not just attraction. Respect for each other's mind, time, and individuality. You do not try to change each other, you grow alongside one another. 2. Emotional stability. Arguments do not become emotional war zones. Disagreements are processed with maturity. You do not weaponize vulnerability. 3. Shared direction. Not necessarily the same hobbies or personalities, but the same values. Values determine the future. If goals, priorities, and pace are aligned, love strengthens with time. If they clash, love erodes. Slowly, painfully, inevitably. 4. Freedom. The relationship is not a cage. It is a home. Both people become more themselves, not less. Love does not shrink identity. Love deepens it. Understanding emotional alignment. You do not choose a partner based on chemistry, attraction, detention, convenience, loneliness, fear of missing out. You choose based on alignment. Do they respect your boundaries? Do they take responsibility for their emotions? Do they grow themselves without being asked? Do they tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable? Do they treat others with decency, not just you? Because here is the reality. How they treat themselves is how they will eventually treat you. If they avoid their feelings, they will avoid yours. If they blame others, they will eventually blame you. If they cannot be alone, they will cling to you. If they do not love themselves, they cannot love you without pain. Emotional alignment matters more than emotional intensity. Intensity fades. Alignment compounds. Never lose yourself again. The greatest tragedy in love is not heartbreak. It is self-betrayal. The moment you abandon your values to keep someone, the moment you silence your needs not to upset them, the moment you bend to fit their comfort, you do not lose them, you lose yourself. And once you lose yourself, the relationship is already over. It just hasn't happened yet. So here is the Stoic principle. Let no love cost you your peace. Let no relationship cost you your self-respect. If love requires self-abandonment, it is not love, it is self-erasure. And you have worked too hard to return to yourself to lose yourself again. The transition to the final stage. You now understand why solitude matters, how the self is built in silence, how love transforms when it comes from fullness instead of fear, how to choose emotional alignment instead of attachment. Part 5. When you are no longer afraid of being alone. There comes a moment sometimes quietly, sometimes suddenly, when the fear of being alone dissolves. It does not happen through force. It does not happen through pretending. It does not happen through denial. It happens the day you realize you are no longer running from yourself. You can sit in silence without craving distraction. You can wake up without needing validation. You can walk forward in life without someone walking beside you. Not because you reject love, but because you are no longer afraid to live without it. This is the threshold of inner freedom. The Stoics said that a person is free not when they are isolated, but when nothing inside them is held hostage by fear. Fear of loneliness used to control you. Now it no longer does. That is self-liberation. Your presence becomes calm. When you are no longer afraid of being alone, you no longer rush. You no longer cling. You no longer chase. You no longer grasp. You no longer bargain for affection. Your presence becomes quiet, but not empty. Soft but not weak. Warm but not needy. Your calm becomes noticeable. People feel it. Not because you make them feel it, but because you are it. Your peace begins to radiate. This is the kind of presence that makes others ask, "What changed?" They don't know the answer, but you do. You finally came home to yourself. Love becomes a gift, not a transaction. When you are no longer afraid of being alone, love stops being something you seek and becomes something you give. You do not invite someone into your life to fill space. Your life is already full. You invite them to experience it with you. You do not ask, "Do you complete me? Do you fix me? Do you keep me company?" You ask, "Do our lives deepen each other? Do we grow in the same direction? Can we love without possession?" This is love without chains. Love that does not beg. Love that does not bind. Love that does not devour. Love that walks alongside. Your standards become silent and unbreakable. At this stage, your standards are no longer rules you try to enforce. They are simply the reflection of who you are. You do not need to explain them. You do not need to defend them. You do not need to justify them. They are embodied. You do not avoid toxic people. Toxic people avoid you. Not because you push them away, but because your peace makes them uncomfortable. Your presence becomes a filter. Only those who resonate will stay. Only those who respect will approach. Only those who are ready will remain. This is how life protects you, not by force, but by alignment. You become difficult to possess, but beautiful to love. This is the paradox of inner freedom. You are no longer easily captured, but you are deeply lovable, because you are whole within yourself, clear in your direction, calm in your spirit, stable in your emotions, respectful of your needs, protective of your peace. You are no longer searching for love. You have become love, not romantic love, a deeper love, a love that moves through the way you listen, think, act, treat others, treat yourself. People feel safe around you, not because you try, but because you are anchored. You have roots now. You are no longer afraid to walk away. This is one of the final signs of emotional sovereignty. You can love someone deeply and still walk away if the relationship costs your peace. You can care but not collapse. You can give but not abandon yourself. You can stay but not at the expense of your self-respect. Because losing someone is not the worst thing. Losing yourself is. This is strength. This is dignity. This is maturity. This is freedom. The final realization. Being single was never about being alone. It was about returning to yourself, rebuilding your identity, discovering your purpose, strengthening your discipline, learning inner peace, rising into emotional independence, choosing love from clarity instead of fear. It was preparation, not isolation, not avoidance, not withdrawal. Preparation for a love that is real, a love that is chosen, a love that makes both souls more alive. Being single is not what you endure on the way to love. Being single is where you become the person capable of loving well. And once you become that person, you will never fear love. You will never chase love. You will never break yourself for love. Because you now understand, love is not something you find. Love is something you are.